Tolkien's faith is subtle in The Lord of the Rings, but the Christian theme of hope is crucial to the Return of the King. It appears 108 times in the Return of the King book, 72 times in The Two Towers, and 116 times in The Fellowship of the Ring. Join Matt and I as we discuss hope's significance in the Return of the King. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to the White City Podcast. Today I have back with me Matt Vandervoort, one of my co-hosts.
Hello.
Yep, it's good to have you back, Matt.
Thanks, Philip.
And yeah, so we're going to be talking about primarily the theme of hope and kind of how that comes together in The Return of the King, and then also like more particular things with Sam, Frodo, and Smeagol, and where like hope kind of links into that, and also how themes of like divine intervention and even like choices kind of play a part in that as well. So to kind of like set the stage for hope, I mean, I think that like one line that's always interesting to me that is between Aragorn and Gandalf is like they're talking about, is Frodo like gonna, do you think Frodo's like gonna make it, basically, like do you think he's in Mordor, and Aragorn asks him like, what does your heart tell you? And I think I'll bring up a quote in the book later on that I think is by Sam about when Frodo is captured, and also has to tie in with like heart and hope in a similar way. But yeah, so I just thought it was kind of interesting. Like sometimes I think of like that heart thing as being like, all right, because like, I don't know, following your heart isn't always like the kind of Christian worldview of things, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where like I don't know. I feel like I see what you're saying, and I think it's a little cliche, and I definitely don't think it's what I mean, unless it's in the book and I'm forgetting about it. But it's not something that Tolkien would have written necessarily. But I think the idea of like you're at an impasse and you don't know what the correct answer is to like there's a sense at which at some point you gotta stop deliberating and you gotta go with your gut kind of, and I think that because correct me if I'm wrong, but is this when they are deciding whether or not they're gonna march on Mordor?
So this is actually like at the beginning of the Return of the King.
Okay.
This is like where they're kind of like at Rohan, and
Like a Dunharrow.
it's actually even before that.
Okay.
Like like what they're talking about is basically Gandalf's like, you know, they're like more okay. That's where they're at. So actually, this is where they're at. They're inside, like the like in Rohan, and like the not, the kind of, how have they called it, like the area where they're having like the party, they're drinking, and
Yeah.
that's where Aragorn comes to Gandalf, and he's like, any
Okay.
sign of Frodo, and Gandalf says no, and they're just going into like how he's like every day he gets closer to Mordor, and
Yeah.
Gandalf and Aragorn's like, what does your heart tell you about like whether or not he's like safe or
Okay.
alive, right?
Yeah. I think. Yeah. Again, I don't necessarily know if that's the most like Tolkien-ish uh,
Right.
way of putting it, but I
Yeah.
think that. I mean, I think there are similar conversations in the books, if I'm recalling correctly, where they basically like, well, we can't know whether or not he's successful or where he is, but we just kind of have to assume that Sauron doesn't have the One Ring because we would know that. And so yeah, so that's sort of an instance of hope. And again, like, I do think hope is a big like, hope beyond hope, like, is a big theme in the Return of the King, because you have Frodo and Sam going into this very hell coded area. Like, it's not subtle that Mordor, which, at least this part of Mordor, that's one thing I like to point out to people, is that, like, in the wider lore, most of Mordor isn't actually an ashy hellscape. It is, Sauron does have to feed people. But the plains of Gorgoroth, I believe is what it is, are these, like, volcanic ashy lava plains. And I do like that part in the movie when Sam and Frodo are just, like, huddled together being like, we're about to be subsumed by lava, but we did it. And then and then the eagles show up. And I think I think Sam is, like, the epitome of hope in this story, where, like, Sam is the unyielding optimist who, like, I think this is part of Tolkien's, like, one of the things that Tolkien is pointing out is, like, the people that have hope in the Lord of the Rings are the small folk. So, like, Elrond and Aragorn and Gandalf, they don't have as much, like, capacity for it, in a sense, because they know the true stakes. They know, the 5,000 year history of conflict between the forces of good and evil in this world. They know what Sauron is capable of if he gets the ring. Whereas Sam is just a gardener, just there to help Mr. Frodo. Like, he's there because he made a promise, essentially. And he doesn't really care what the stakes are, because he knows that he said he would do something and he's gonna do it. And he helps goad Frodo on. Like, Frodo would not have gotten nearly as far without Sam, even just, like, for as little of a thing as, like, his cooking. And so yeah. So, like, I think that's, like, Sam is the hopeful character in this story.
Yeah. No, I'd agree, definitely. And it's interesting because, like, what you're talking about, like, something that I've thought of is, okay, at the Council of Elrond, right, you have Elrond, who tried to get somebody to throw the ring into Mount Doom, obviously knows the strain of it. So Gandalf probably knows too. And then them sending off Frodo, do they actually believe that that Frodo is going to throw the ring into Mount Doom?
So, okay, I do want to point out one thing, that is that I don't think in the book continuity there is ever a point at which Elrond and Isildur are, like, at the cracks of Mount Doom about to throw the ring. Like, Isildur cuts the ring off and is like, I'm taking this as a trophy, and everyone's kind of just like, yeah, sure. Like, there's no, they don't have this idea of, you have to destroy the ring. Like, maybe there is some, and maybe I'm misremembering, but, like, I don't think, like, Isildur is never, like, in the text, it's not until the movies come out, in the text, Isildur is never, like, condemned for taking the ring. Or at least he's not condemned for taking the ring in the moment. Objectively, it is kind of his right, because Sauron took something precious of his, he is taking something precious of Sauron's. So, as, like, they're not even, like, when they come up with it, they're just kind of like, well, the only place that this is probably feasible for it to get destroyed is where it was created. Because, like, they do legitimately pitch, like, What if we send it to the Valar? Well, the Valar wouldn't want it because it's super evil and it would be not good to have there. What if we threw it into the sea? Well, eventually he would find it again. What if we send it to Tom Bombadil? He would just lose it. So like they do pitch other ideas, but in the movie it's kind of this whole thing where like they sort of play up the ring, um, because you have to remember that uh like they're crafting the rings. They only know of the one ring after it's created, and they just know that it's dominating. They don't really know what's going on. So, well, I don't know. Maybe they do a little bit. I can't remember the exact wording in the book. But yeah, there's no like climactic moment where Isildur is kind of like Isildur gets a bad rap. He's like I don't know. There is some of the like the weakness of men and stuff in him, and like all this like the greed and things like that. But I don't I don't think there was ever a moment in the books where um I'm trying to remember. This whole thing could be completely wrong, but I'm pretty sure there is no scene in the books where Elrond and Isildur are there at the cracks of doom about to destroy the ring, and then Isildur goes, "No, I want it." Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so it but then so on top of that, Gandalf like Gandalf's MO at this point is throw a hobbit at the problem. Um, that's what he did in The Hobbit, and then it worked,
Huh.
and so he's like, "Huh, what if we try this again?" Because he's the only one that looks at the small folk and are like literally the small folk, and are like, "What if, you know, people underestimate them? Like the whole reason the plan works is because Sauron doesn't know that hobbits exist, and two, if he did know that hobbits existed, he would be like, why would anyone give my ring to a hobbit? That's the dumbest idea you could possibly have. They're the least equipped to use this. Like, he just assumes that everyone is thinking in power dynamics, and Gandalf is like, no, the hobbits are the only ones that have their priorities straight and just want to go home and relax and have happy lives. And so they know that to continue not continue having the Shire be the coolest and most homely cozy place in the world, there still has to be a world. And so yeah, like I think it's epitomized in the scene where Sam takes the ring to get it back to Frodo. And the best like the ring kind of doesn't know what to do with Sam. They're like, "I'll make you the best gardener." And Sam's just like, "Well, that's a lie. I first of all, I don't even want to be the best gardener, and second of all, I know enough about you to know you're lying." And so like I think that's almost, again, I don't think Frodo was weak or anything, but I think that's like it's almost like Frodo, because he has all this lore and knowledge that he's learned from Bilbo and Gandalf and the elves, like I think that contributes to the difficulty of the task. Like I think because I don't think anyone like if a random hobbit like Sam had found the ring or like Bilbo, we have an example of this. He doesn't try to destroy the ring because he doesn't know the ring is evil. He's just like, "Oh, this is a convenient trinket I have found." Um, Frodo now knows kind of the weight that's on his shoulders, and so he has enough hobbitiness in him that he can actually take it. But he also has enough knowledge that the ring can kind of latch onto that and use it to get at him. Um, and so, like, I think the thing that the ring strips away from Frodo is hope. Um, and the thing that the ring cannot strip away from Sam or doesn't have the chance to is hope. Um, like I think there's a reason that Tolkien went on record at one point basically saying he thought the main character of Lord of the Rings was Sam. Is because Sam is like the ultimate everyman. Like, so there's an interesting point, and this is a little off topic, but I think it's just an important thing to note about Sam, is that basically, not basically, every other member of the Fellowship is some kind of nobility or of that ilk.
Hmm.
Aragorn is obviously like the heir of Isildur, and like even though he's a ranger who grew up in the wilds, he's the chieftain. He's the chieftain of the Dunedain. So he is like the nobility and literally becomes royalty. Um, I mean, I guess Sam does get titles later on, but Frodo, Pippin, and Merry are all from these very fancy, well-to-do Hobbit families. From the Bagginses to some extent, like Bag End is like a Hobbit mansion, but also the Tooks and the Brandybucks, who are like actual Hobbit nobility. Then Gimli is the son of Gloin, so he's a dwarf, but like if you look at it, he's actually is a member of like the dwarven royal family. Legolas is the son of Thranduil, so he's an elf prince. Boromir is the son of Denethor, so he's a prince of Gondor. Um, Everyone else in the Fellowship is some type of noble, and Sam is just Sam. And so he is like the ultimate example of just a random guy getting thrown into all of this nonsense. Oh, and Gandalf obviously is a Maya. Um, so Sam is just like the one guy who gets thrown into all this nonsense, and he's the one guy who at the end of it is like still normal in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, so
yeah,
it's
and so
basically. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, so Sam is like the sort of supposed to be our point of reference, I think.
Yeah, and like you were saying, Tolkien's making the point of the little people, and more than one way of the
Yeah,
word. They're the ones who, at the end of the day, defeated evil and you know brought things to victory. And so
yeah.
Gandalf knows that,
It's
and Gandalf's putting his hope that, hey, I know these stout-hearted little hobbits who, don't really care about anything but like simple things in life, right?
yeah, like it's kind of like the idea of like the greatest victory over evil is not is not to defeat evil, but it is to endure and persevere in the face of it. Um, and so that's kind of what the entirety of what the hobbits represent. Um, another symbol of hope in the Return of the King, if I can kind of move us along here, is the tree, the white tree in Minas Tirith. I think it's handled differently in the books and in the movies, and I think for the story that the movies are telling, the way they use the tree is um, good and it makes sense. That the tree blossoms again when Aragorn is crowned, and it's kind of a representation of this like restoration. Whereas in the in the books, the tree doesn't re-blossom. They find a new sapling. So Gandalf takes Aragorn up into the mountains a few weeks after his coronation, and he finds this successor tree that they plant. And it's like it ties in sort of as like it ties into restoration in a different way, in that like the tree itself is like tree royalty because it's a descendant of the silver tree of Valinor that is like the precursor to the moon, and has like the light of the Silmarils in it. So, or the light of this rather, the Silmarils have the light of the trees in them. So it is less like it's a continuation of the line of kings in the same way that the tree is the continuation. It's the line of the tree kings, but also like it's not just a restoration to what has gone before. It is a rebirth of something entirely new. Because like also it's because it's not just the Aragorn. Very nice. Um, it's not just that Aragorn is restoring the, like in the movies it's like, ah, yes, he is the king of Gondor, and it's like in the books is like, no, he's the king of like everything that isn't Rohan, basically. um and even that's only because he agrees to let Rohan become in, like stay independent. So the tree, like, one, it's a very visceral symbol of like what was dead is now alive, and in the movies it's that like revival, and in the books it's very much like a rebirth. And so I think that's kind of a, like, I think that's something that the movies kind of lean a little bit too into, like almost like an elvish interpretation of it, where like the elves want to preserve, they want to maintain, and the whole point of the Lord of the Rings is that the elves can no longer preserve. It is that it is now the age of men. It is now the birth of something new, and that's not a bad thing. Like another big difference is that the movies never really, you don't watch the movies in the context of the idea that this is the ancient mythic past of our world, which is the way the books were written. Obviously, like, they don't make direct references to things in our world, but like Tolkien's underlying framework was that this was a mythology for Britain, and so, and so, the end of the Lord of the Rings is the ushering in of our world, essentially. And so it's bittersweet in the books because it is the rise and the fall of, it's the fall of the elves and the old world and the magic, but it is the rise of us, and ultimately it is the rise of what would become the redeeming work of Christ in Tolkien's like understanding of his world. So,
Bold statement.
well, yeah, I mean, like there are, I again, I'd have to look exactly, but like there is like an idea that like the fourth age ends with like the flood. Like there's this idea in some of Tolkien's letters that like uh eventually Gondor does get corrupt and kind of leads into the corruption before the flood, and thus the end of the fourth age, like the end of the age that begins at the end of the Lord of the Rings, is uh the Noahic flood. Again, I cannot remember where I'm pulling this from. I could be wrong. It could be like there's another age in between them, but that this is kind of the setup, the idea that um the end of the Lord of the Rings is the rise of the age of men, and the elves are passing away over the sea, and the dwarves are all kind of slowly dying off, and the orcs go somewhere, I don't know. And so, yeah, and so while it's bittersweet, I mean, like, the whole end of the Lord of the Rings is bittersweet. Like, Frodo goes off to the Undying Lands to live out his days in true peace, but also he's essentially dying to his friends. Um, so, yeah. So, the end of the movies is kind of this all like, yay, everything's happy, and then, oh no, Frodo goes away. Whereas the end of the books is like, we won, and in, like, the world is indelibly changed in a way that's like slightly worse, but also can be better. And like I think it very much plays into, Tolkien's experiences in World War One, where it's like we've made peace, sort of, um, admittedly, but like the world is inexorably changed, and we now have to live. You cannot go back to the world that was. You have to live in the world that is now. Um, and it's sort of a bitter hope, but it is a hope. It's like hope versus nostalgia. Like, it's almost like the opposite of hope in uh Tolkien's world is this sort of nostalgia, and it's the sense that the elves represent this nostalgia and longing for the old world and the way it was, and the humans represent hope and moving forward. And so I think you can almost see those two views in the way, like, this was not, I'm sure, what Peter Jackson was going for when he put the trees, because I'm sure he was just doing it like, we don't need a scene of Aragorn going up into the mountains, because admittedly for a movie you don't need a scene of Aragorn going up into the mountains and finding a tiny tree and being like, oh my goodness, because the Lord of the Rings has enough endings as it is. Again, I love the books and I love the ending of the Return of the King, but like, you cannot adapt the end of the Return of the King into a movie because there's like 7 endings. um, so like, I get what he was doing, but I think that in a sense the ending of the Lord of the Rings movies is more nostalgic and like a return to what was, whereas the end of the books is very much like a hopeful ending.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Because like instead of it being, because like it's what you're saying is that in the movie it's the old, like this is the old tree and we're trying to preserve like the old tree and like the old
Yeah,
ways, whereas in the
yeah,
book it's like, hey, we have this new tree and we're moving on to something new,
yeah.
kind of a
Because
thing.
like, so that's another thing that I find interesting is that like Aragorn is not actually the return of the line of kings of Gondor. He is a descendant of the kings of Arnor, and thus that gives him the claim to the throne. But it's not a restoration. It is, we found the next heir of a different kingdom who's like our sibling kingdom, and he is the king of Gondor because he's the king of the Númenóreans, but like he's not actually like he's not Gondorian. um, and so whereas I don't think you really get that idea in the, because I mean, again, you could not throw this in the movie because it's in the appendices of the Lord of the Rings, and it's like super obscure lore. I mean, it's in the book, but it's still like, most people do not have the nuances of, oh well, this king went off and laid his crown and scepter on the thing and went and fought the Witch King and never came back, and so the stewards are waiting for them, but they almost, like, they made a pact right before that if the king died, the kings of Arnor or Arthedain at the time, and it's just like, it's this really convoluted setup that like, it's fascinating because it works both as a like it works both as a, here's the nitty gritty exact details of why the fantasy politics works out that Aragorn gets to be king, but also it's like, Aragorn is the descendant of our super cool founder and therefore gets to be king. Like, um, anyways, I think it's a really cool duality. We got really off topic here. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just yeah, bringing it back to the tree there,
yeah,
I guess, and uh, and the like the restoration of the Lion of Kings and the hope, the
yeah,
hope that that brings, I guess. And it's almost like the tree in the movie. Like sometimes, like I've thought that the tree is trying to resemble that there is still hope. Like it was like
yeah,
it was like if the people have hope, then the tree is like going to like have all these blossoms, and the people don't have hope, then there isn't going to be like all these blossoms.
yeah. Like I was gonna say, so it's, to me it's less about like the tree itself being the dead tree is kind of the symbol of, is the symbol of hope. Like, yeah, it's dead, but it's also still there. Um, And so the blossoms, to me, the blossoms represent the fact that there's a king on the throne, which, could go hand in hand with the hope of the people, but like it's more a symbol of royalty. Um, and so the blossoms kind of represent like a fulfillment of the hope, if that makes sense, because the tree, like the reason they don't tear down the tree is because the tree is a symbol of the king, and yeah, the line of kings failed, but we're holding out that one day the king will return. And so uh like it's the same reason why Denethor never sits on the throne. It's all there's all these, and like part of it is that he just wanted to create a really cool symbolic kingdom that runs on tradition. And like I think that's almost also a symbol, like also part of what he's going for is that Gondor is like atrophying. Like they are so tied up in the traditions of the Númenóreans and the traditions of the kings of Gondor, and like we are this mighty kingdom that's like kind of not like it is mighty. Don't get me wrong, but it's this everything is failing. It's the last gasp of a glorious kingdom, which is why like I think it's why like Rohan is interesting to me, because it's a kingdom that's not as one, it's a younger kingdom. Two, its traditions are less about like preserving the past and more about like their identity as a kingdom. And so to me, Rohan seems like a more lively, like Rohan seems like a more spirited and lively and hopeful place than Gondor, because Rohan to a certain extent is just kind of concerned with the affairs of now. Um whereas Gondor is like stuck in the past.
Not like the elves, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, a lot like the elves. Um, this is sort of the pitfall of like the Númenóreans are very like elvish men, um, but that's not necessarily a good thing, because they're like it's not a bad thing, but it's like men are supposed to be men and elves are supposed to be elves, and they have very different functions in Tolkien's world. And like I said, elves preserve the past, men change the future. And so like now of course there is this like there are these connections where it's like the Dunedain are the descendants of these three houses of men that went to Beleriand, and like the Rohirrim are the descendants of like the cousins of these three houses of men. So they are like distantly related, 5,000 years in the past, so they're not related, but whatever. And so, yeah, so you get these, you get these sorts of like there are strains of men that are. It's not that they're necessarily like better, because I don't think that's something that Tolkien. Well, I don't know. I don't think that's really what Tolkien was going for. I think it's more that there are some strains of men that were more true to Ilúvatar, essentially, and there are some strains of men that like get corrupted. But the like that's one of the things that I find interesting is like the men that fight for Sauron aren't really evil per se. Like there are some of them that are in it for the the evilness, but there's most of them it's just like this is our traditional ally, this is the guy who's come to us, he's actually done stuff for us. And then at the end, the hardcore holdouts, Aragorn, the Gondorians have to go and kill them, but like most of the Haradrim and the Southrons and all these people, like as soon as they see Sauron defeated, give up, and Aragorn just lets them go. Like because he's like they're not evil. And I think he even like he does go and fight wars in the east, but like he also makes alliances in the east. So it's like I forget where I'm going with this.
Yeah. No, we were.
Hope.
You were just going off of hope.
Hope for men.
Yeah.
Men, hope. Hi, here, I'm tying it all together. Men, even if they fight for evil, can be redeemed, and there's hope for all of them. There we go. That's definitely what I was going for.
Yeah.
100%.
All right, so let's move on to the next point. Major point of hope that I think is in the movie that is not in the book is when
Yeah.
Pippin and Gandalf are talking, and Gandalf, Pippin's like, "Well, I didn't know that this would be it or whatever," and Gandalf's like, "Oh, I didn't know this would be the end," and Gandalf's like, "Oh, this isn't the end, you know. There are
Yeah.
white shores," and I can't remember the rest of the quote, but I still think that was a cool
Yeah.
part of the movie. And I guess like the biggest
I
thing is just that like there's more like beyond our world, and there's more to hope for than just what's here. And I think that is very much a telling kind of theme in a lot of Tolkien than just that. But
I will say I think like I like that quote. I think it works better in the movie than it would in the books because in the books like the place he's describing is a place you can go technically like without dying. Um but um in yeah, so I like there's that sense of hope of it doesn't matter if we win because even if I die, I still am going to paradise. Um which yeah, again, it works it works in the movies, but and I think the theme is the same in the books because hobbits are essentially an offshoot of humanity. So for the purposes of like Tolkienian metaphysics, if we want to go there, I would say hobbits share the fate of men. Which is we don't know, we just know that they go to Iluvatar. Um, and so in a sense, like in the books, Gandalf would almost be jealous of Pippin because in the books, Gandalf, when he dies, returns to probably eventually returns to the Valar, whereas Pippin gets to go be with his creator. Um, unless you're Turin, who's sitting somewhere waiting to beat the crap out of Morgoth. But, anyways,
my.
uh, I think I've talked about my theory that somewhere in
Yeah.
the depths of the halls of Mandos, Turin and Feanor are sitting at a table just smoldering at each other, just glaring. Anyways, so, but yes, that like it's very much um like that's the thing that like it, I think we should get into this more about how it's not so like indulge me to ramble for a second because I promise it's going somewhere interesting. Um, so Iluvatar creates the two children of Iluvatar. There are the elves and there are the humans. And the elves are these like immortal, ethereal, spiritual beings, basically, who exist to preserve goodness. And when they die, their souls go into this like waiting area, but then they can come back. You see this with Glorfindel, who he dies fighting Balrogs, and then eventually he returns to the Undying Lands, and then eventually he returns to Middle Earth, kind of as a pseudo Astari. Um, so the elves endure eternally. They, and going back to like the idea of nostalgia versus hope, the elves are that nostalgia factor because all they can experience is like they have essentially eternal memories. And so all they experience is the past and seeing the glories of the past fade away. Whereas humans, death is granted to them as a gift. It's called the gift of Iluvatar. It is this idea that yes, you may not be here for a you might not be in Arda forever, but you are here. You like you burn brighter, you can change your fate, and at the end of the day you return to me to bask in my presence. And so your fate is not tied up in this um in the world in the way that the elves are. And so when Gandalf is talking to Pippin, again, this is the movie, but like this idea of, especially for mortals, there is something beyond. Like, it's not just that there's something like, oh yay, there's something after death. It's like there is something beyond this mortal plane that is better and is for you. Whereas for the elves, there isn't really anything. Like, at the end of time, they do get to go and be with Iluvatar and all that stuff. But like for the elves, Middle Earth, Arda is their realm essentially. Whereas for the men, this is not their home. Their home is with Iluvatar, and it's beyond Arda. It's beyond where they are now. And so, yeah, so, again, I don't know if Peter Jackson was thinking this when he was writing this dialogue, but with that idea, men can go, and Pippin, who is essentially a human, can go and fight their hardest and do their best and know that if I succeed, I succeed, and if I fail, I go to what is coming. Like, I get what I was meant for. So, which is very much like, in Paul, where Paul says, like, to live is, what is this? To live is gain and to die is Christ, or something like that. Where, like, it's this idea of, if I live, I can continue on in my goals, and I can continue on spreading, the gospel and goodness and things like that. And if I die, I go to my eternal reward. And so, like, I think that is very much in Tolkien's view of eternity, is that we don't know where men's souls go in The Lord of the Rings, but we do know that it's better than this. Unless, you try to storm the Undying Lands and then you get trapped under the earth for eternity, essentially, until the end of time. So,
Oh my. Yeah, that's great. All right, so kind of as like a segue into some Frodo and Sam stuff here.
yeah.
So I was actually happy. I think this quote's kind of cool. So this is when after Frodo is taken by the orcs in the Two
Yeah.
Towers book. So Sam reeled, clutching at the stone. He felt as if the whole dark world was turning upside down. So great was the shock that he almost swooned. But even as he fought to keep hold on his senses, deep inside him was he aware of the comment. You fool, he isn't dead, and your heart knew it. Don't trust your head, Samwise. It is not the best part of you. The trouble with you is that you really never had any hope. Now, what is to be done? For the moment, nothing but to prop himself against the unmoving stone and listen to the vile orc voices. There's kind of like that connection between like hope isn't like I like what I think that like in this situation Tolkien's writing is like there's not necessarily like hope isn't always, I don't know, like maybe rational. It's like you're hoping
Yeah.
beyond like what might be there. So
I think that is kind of what he's going for here, is not a, like, oh, just do what you want to do, but like, trust your, I don't know, it gets complicated because, like, trust your instincts. It's not always the best thing to do, but like, there is this sense of, when it comes down to it, Sam like I honestly think this is essentially Tolkien's way of telling people don't overthink it, because uh I am very guilty of this. It's like it's the kind of thing where the more you think about it, the more you're likely to assume the worst, and the worse you assume, the less you're likely to do. Whereas what Sam needs to do in this moment is uh figure out a plan and then just do it. And it works because he has, you know, the fact that he's Samwise Gamgee and is the pluckiest little dude ever. Um, and the fact that, in this instance, he does have the one ring of power with him. Um, and so he just goes and like it's one of those things where it's not necessarily like I think this is the difference. Is it's not that Sam is setting his goals according to his heart and according to his gut. It's that Sam has a goal, which is eventually destroy the ring, but in short, protect the ring bearer because he has a duty, because he swore an oath to this. Um, and in that moment, listening to his brain is trying to rationalize, oh, if you do this, you'll get killed. If you do this, whereas his gut is just saying, just do it. His gut's wearing Nikes. He's he's like, in this moment, all I can't think about what went wrong or what could go wrong. I just have to think about what I need to do next. And so that's where he's trusting his heart, is because he's trusting his instincts and he's trusting his like baseline, this is what I need to do, rather than here's all the reasons I can't or shouldn't. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the like the it's almost more base and primal than hope. It's like it's that moment of I just can't analyze this. I just have to do it no matter what. So and then we get one of the coolest scenes where Sam goes and essentially storms a tower by himself, but doesn't have to do anything because all the orcs are already killing each other. And then they become terrified because uh like I love that scene so much because they're all just like, it's a giant elf warrior, it's some sneaky goblin guy, it's what is going on, why do we keep dying? And it's because it's like the magic of the ring and the magic of the place, and like again, it's just one of those things where it's like it's just Samwise Gamgee is just so darn determined that even the like twisted magics of this place can't help but help him achieve his goals. Um, Anyways,
Yeah.
I I love, and he has the Phial of Galadriel, which has a Silmaril which burns evil things, so that helps. Um, we really, I feel like people do not talk about the fact that uh Frodo is gifted possibly the most holy object in the Lord of the Rings as a flashlight, and like not the file itself but the light, because again, like, so the light in the file is the light of that particular star, which is actually a Silmaril on the bow of, yeah, of Arendel's ship Vingalot, uh which the Silmaril, the light of the Silmarils, is the captured mingled light of the two trees. So um first of all, that's why the light burns Shelob. It's not just that it's a holy light. It's that this is the same light. This is like the two trees getting vengeance on uh Ungoliant, because Ungoliant is the one that killed the trees and wanted to eat the Silmarils, which would have destroyed her, because she wanted that holy light. But then, of course, also she like goes mad because it's too much for her. And so it's the same light fighting Ungoliant's daughter, um, that is is out here. That is what helps Sam to defeat Shelob. Is like this moment is vengeance for the two trees. I don't think it's a coincidence that when fighting Shelob is one of the two moments in the Lord of the Rings where you get reference to Beren and Turin, because and the other one is in Rivendell, which is essentially just a First Age kingdom reincarnated into Middle Earth. It's in these moments where the two story, like the only other place I think he could have mentioned it is when fighting the Balrog, because it's like one of those moments of intense, like if you're just reading the Lord of the Rings, you're like, wow, this is a really good moment. But if you've also read the Silmarillion, it's like these two stories are bleeding together right now, where, you know, you have the remnants of the ancient past coming together in a fight that, like, even Sam doesn't know what's going on, but he's still, you know, the champion of, like, pure righteousness in this moment. And so, yeah, like, this is why I think, sorry,
uh,
I really love where these, like, so I read the Lord of the Rings first, and then I read the Silmarillion, and then I went back and reread the Lord of the Rings like last year. um and you know, I read the Silmarillion a decade ago, but I think partially because of, like, we've been talking about this stuff, and partially because of thinking about the Silmarillion, like, you can read the Lord of the Rings in such a way that it really does feel like the last chapter of this story, where you have all the connections to the Silmarillion that, like, they're real subtle and they're very flavorful if you haven't read the Silmarillion, but if you have, it's like, oh my goodness, this is the same story. This is the last gasp for now of this ancient fight of good being ever present and evil trying to corrupt it, and evil seeming to overcome it, but at the end of the day it just can't. um Anyways.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, just to kind of like wrap up this like the ending part, where I
Yeah.
also wanted to say with like Frodo, Sam, and Gollum.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
think that one thing I think is interesting is that in the movie, especially like maybe the Return of the King, but like
Yeah.
Frodo is definitely made to be like very weakened by the ring and easily susceptible to Gollum, which I don't think that's not the way that the book was written, and
No.
Frodo was like definitely more so this character who like was showing strength in the moment, I guess, you know, by carrying the ring.
So yeah, that's one of the things that I don't like about the the movie, is its portrayal of Frodo, because, like, Frodo kind of comes across as a wimp towards the end of the movie, because, like, he, like, I don't know. Again, it's been a while since I've seen the movie, and so maybe more of this comes out than I think. But he just kind of, like, you don't really get a lot of his internal moments, whereas, like, in the books, there's, like, Sam keeps getting these glances of, like, Frodo really physically struggling to hold up the ring around his neck, and, like, he's fighting it this whole way. He's fighting the urge to put it on. He's fighting uh to take every step. Like, it's the again, I don't think it's exactly word for word like this in the book, but, like, the I can't carry it, but I can carry you scene is, like, so good, because that is one of the moments where it's like Sam gets that, oh, this isn't, like, he gets it at this moment. And I think Sam gets it the whole way. But like in the movies, he gets manipulated by Smeagol, which doesn't make any sense because the whole point is that he's resisting mental manipulation essentially the whole time. So yeah, I don't like that part of the movies. And like, I kind of get it because in the book, they just get separated because it's dark in the cave, and that's not very interesting. And I think they kind of cut out this idea of there being all these caves. Like they do have some caves, but like they're not as extensive in the movies as it is in the books, where they're like traveling through them for like a day. Um, Whereas, um, in the movie they had to keep pacing up and stuff like that. But yeah, in the movies, Frodo really comes across as like the ring's kind of winning, and the whole point is that the ring isn't winning until it's at a point where, according to Tolkien, literally no one could resist putting the ring on. Like everyone else in the story, with the possible exception, I think, of Samwise Gamgee. But everyone else in the story would have put the ring on way earlier. No one would have not put the ring on in at the Cracks of Doom. Um, it's just that the only people that like it wouldn't have immediately gone terribly for is like Gandalf, Galadriel, and maybe Elrond. uh, and so like yeah, in the books, Frodo is very much like not triumphant, but like it's this moment of tragedy in the books because this character that you expect to be able to do it because so far he has resisted um doesn't throw the ring in and claims the ring, whereas in the movies it's kind of all building up to this, oh yeah, Frodo's totally going to put the ring on. um and again, it's not quite that blatant, but like I don't know. Frodo just kind of seems like he doesn't seem like he's struggling in the movie. He seems like he's like possessed, kind of. Um,
Yeah.
and so, and then of course, Gollum, you know, Gollum taking the ring is
Matter of his own
it's such
destruct.
a
It's like his own.
it's
How'd you say? Like,
hoisted by his own petard.
yeah, I know. Like, it's a
Like
result of his own like conniving or just destruction. I don't know.
yeah, I
Like,
mean, I think that it's very much a Gollum and Frodo are parallel characters in this, where Gollum is fighting the ring even though he doesn't have it, and Frodo, like Gollum doesn't have the ring and is still fighting because he loves Frodo, but he doesn't understand the weight of what the ring is, whereas Frodo does and is also fighting it. And at the end, like, you never really think that Smeagol would not try to claim the ring. You never really think that Frodo would try to claim the ring. And in the end, they both, like, Frodo does claim the ring, but then Gollum, who is even more bound to the ring, uh, gets the ring, and in that one moment, he's happy. And then in that one moment of, like, divine intervention, essentially, uh, he falls to his death. And it's like Gollum, like it's foreshadowed so much where it's like Gollum still has his own part to play, and it's because Gollum has to be the one to destroy the ring because no one could do it of their own free will, but only Gollum is like clumsy enough, I don't know, only Gollum is capable of not immediately tr- like because of who he is, because he would celebrate getting the ring back and essentially being under the possession of the ring. uh he's the only one that would be reckless enough to fall into the cracks of doom. And so, um, and it's only because he gets the ring from Deagle, who got it from the river, who got it from Isildur, that the ring can be destroyed. So,
Yeah.
um,
It's almost like in that moment too where out of like everybody who's staying there at Mount Doom, like Smeagol's probably going to be the one who's most likely going to end up with the ring. You know, if the ring can like, who is the ring pulling against the most? I guess.
again, it's also like we're talking here like from a Smeagol perspective, but it's also the ring is the one. Its own arrogance and desires are what destroy it, because it wants to get back to Smeagol, because it thinks if I can get it to Smeagol, then I can get back to Sauron, because Smeagol is weak-willed. And so, yeah, like, I honestly think we've been taking the wrong tact here of, like, it's not that Smeagol destroys the ring, it's that the ring destroys the ring. Because the ring, just like Sauron, goes for what it thinks is the best option, which is actually the worst possible option it could have picked in the moment. And so the ring's pull on Gollum is what ultimately destroys the ring, not necessarily Gollum's own desire for the ring. And so, uh, yeah, it's the ring's own evil and like schemes that ultimately defeats itself. And I think that is I'm literally just putting this together right now. That is, I think, Tolkien's ultimate point, is that evil destroys itself. Sauron cannot fathom the mind of good and of the lowly, and thus he is destroyed. The ring cannot fathom uh, being claimed by anyone but Sauron, and so he tries to go to Sauron by letting Gollum get it, and thus it is destroyed. Um, it is always, always, always that in the end, evil is worthless and cannot follow through, and thus it is always self-defeating. Saruman, if he hadn't turned evil, if he hadn't sided with Sauron, he would have been fine. He would have been the greatest wizard. He would have been the one that helps defeat Sauron in the end, like Gandalf does. But because he gets so overcome with despair and obsession about the ring and conquest and power, it's his own plans, it's his own raiding of Rohan and stuff like that, that ultimately leads to... It's his own mistreatment of Wormtongue that ultimately leads Wormtongue to be the one that stabs him in the back. And so, yeah, every great evil in The Lord of the Rings is ultimately destroyed by its own evil. And I cannot believe I did not realize this until literally just now.
Yeah.
So
I think like I agree, but there's still something I think about like there still has to be a good side.
oh yeah, no, 100%. Like there still needs to be resistance to there still needs to be resistance, obviously. Like, I think that's a major theme of the book, is resistance in the face of ultimate evil. But, like, it's never won by a sword fight. It's never won by this. It's always that evil, like, obviously, if there was no resistance to, like, kind of the model here is that you have to hold out long enough against evil, and eventually it will collapse under its own weight. And so, like, there's a reason that Aragorn doesn't fight Sauron. There's a reason that Gandalf doesn't fight Sauron, because the idea is kind of that when you win by overwhelming force, you just become the tyrant too. Like, I know we've talked about this. I'll have to link the letter again somewhere, that Tolkien has this letter where he talks about who could have claimed the ring and defeated Sauron. And he basically says, Gandalf definitely, Galadriel probably, and if Galadriel could do it, then Elrond could do it. And that's it. But when he talks about what would Gandalf with the ring look like, Gandalf becomes an even worse tyrant than Sauron, because Gandalf is ostensibly motivated by goodness to the extent that he basically creates an extreme magical police state. And so, like, it's what Galadriel says, where, like, in place of a Dark Lord, you would have a Dark Queen. Like, beautiful and terrible, all would love me and despair. It's this idea that when you embrace the methods of, like, when you embrace this sort of conquering, overwhelming odds mentality, you become susceptible to the very same corruption and evil that the Dark Lords and the evil side has, and you essentially become no better than them. Whereas, like, if you look constantly in Lord of the Rings, the whole point of the ring is, the whole temptation of it is, use me to defeat Sauron, but everyone knows if you use it to defeat Sauron, you become like Sauron. You essentially just replace him. And so, yes, good needs to resist evil, but it can't. If it defeats evil, it's at risk of becoming evil. But if it outlasts evil, if that spark of goodness and hope remains, that is when that's I think that's what Tolkien is getting at, is that again, like I was saying earlier with the Hobbits and the people like that, good, the best way to defeat evil is simply to persevere and endure and outlast it.
Yeah, that's a good word, Matt. I think that kind of summarizes it up pretty good.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming on and recording with me.
Thanks for having me on, Philip.
Yeah, this is great.
Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should do it more often, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
alrighty.
well, thanks everybody for for tuning in, and catch us for our next episode next week.
All right.